What do you think the modern day version of the cigarette is? The thing that we accept as normal currently, but that the rest of in 50 years we'll look back and be like, how are we so dumb to do this thing?
I think brain meds are like, we have no idea what's going on in the brain. And so like we take, it's kind of like electroshock therapy of like 50 years ago. We're like, I can't believe we did that. Or like lobotomies, you know what I mean? Like, I can't believe we used to do that. And I think a lot of the psych drugs that people put kids on really early is tough. I think the problem with this stuff, there's part of me that even hates that I got into it, but like wherever there's a need, there's always a 10 times bigger amount of abuse of a solution, right? And so it's kind of like workers' comp. Charlie Munger talks about this, but it's like, it is absolutely wrong that someone should work and get injured on the job and not be compensated by the company that they were doing work rightfully so for, right? The problem is, how do you manage that when there's no way to hold people accountable? And so what happens is you actually sacrifice the system for a select few. And so I tend to be a global optimizer, but a local minimizer. What that means is like, I'm willing to sacrifice the small, I'm willing to sacrifice the pawn for the game. And society is not willing to sacrifice the pawn for the game because the pawn is a headline. And that's the problem with how media, I'm not even getting into that, but like that's what makes it hard. And that's why it's hard for sometimes cultures to move forward. But I think most people on a common sense level would rather have the whole benefit, but they cannot make the decision in the short term. And so like, total side note on this. If you want an amazing razor for predicting people's behavior, just look at what will reward them the fastest. And you can, with veritable certainty, guess what people and groups of people will do. Mm-hmm. Should we print more money or should we reel things back? Well, short term, this one's better. That's what we'll do. It's near impossible. It's hard for one person to do it for themselves. It's almost impossible for a group. And so groups will always optimize for the short term until eventually they run out and another group wins.
It almost seems like there's a heaviness within you when you're speaking about it. Is that accurate? Because your mood and complexion change completely.
Yeah, I don't like getting into this because it gets off the beaten path of. It's just a bummer, and I would get more into it, but I don't like getting into the politics around things. I've never been in it ever. I've like just never gotten involved. Because I try to play games that I have variables that I have control over. And so I got this from my dad, actually. But he said, I only play games if I know I'm going to win. And people might take that and take a lot of different things from it. But I'll tell you what he meant by that. Was that he wanted to do all the preparation and have all the unfair advantages he possibly could before taking the first step into a game. And I would say that that's probably the biggest difference between people who are big time winners and everyone else, is that like, once you learn the rules of the game, then you learn how to stack the deck. And you can do it ethically and you can do it legally, right? Like, easy way to stack the deck, wait longer than your competition, right? Like you can come in with unfair advantages simply by measuring success on different time horizons or measuring a different metric for success, right? Like right now, what am I optimizing for? I'm optimizing for brand. I'm not optimizing for money, right? So I'm measuring something different than somebody else might be. And so someone who maybe start making content at the same time as me might be making more money than me today. But are they winning? I don't know. We're playing different games, right? And so I think that lens can be used by most people, and most people don't do that because they don't even know the rules of the game that they're trying to play. And so they are pawns in someone else's game. And so I think that's where the heaviness of this whole thing comes from for me, is that like, I hate not feeling like I have an element of control over the outcomes in my life. And a lot of the stuff that's happening in the world, I don't feel like I have control over. And that annoys me. And so I focus on the few things that are controllable for me, and I direct all of my attention there.
Makes a lot of sense. I've also taken a similar approach. And then I'll hear from loved ones, or you should be paying attention to the news. You should. And it's like, well, I mean, I'm going to control the things that I'm going to control. And part of me is like, maybe when I'm that age and I can impact it more, I will. But in this moment, I can't. Is that a similar approach you take as well?
Yeah. The question always comes down to, what am I going to do? Right. And so if the input, like, I consume all this media, right? I get quote educated, which not even getting into like where you get sources of information which conflict, and it's tough for anybody right now, like to even know what an informed decision is, right? Because no one actually can touch the situation anymore. Everything's it's banana phone times 100, right now across all media. So it's really hard to have an informed decision. And so for me, and I really thought about this, and I was like, the reason I voted one time in my life. The reason that it's so tough is that if I'm going to vote, I would like to be an informed voter. In order for me to be an informed voter, people are like, it only takes 10 minutes. I'm like, if you're an idiot, it only takes 10 minutes to literally click the buttons. It takes weeks to be informed about what buttons you're pressing. And so for me, that's where the time trade-off has not been good. And this isn't me saying I'm an advocate for not voting. I'm an advocate for being informed. But the cost of being informed relative to the amount of change I can make with my vote is relatively small. And so for me, I look at the opportunity cost of that time. And could I, with that same time, more positively impact my life than what my one vote will impact my life through? And for me, the answer is yes. And so then I choose not to. And so I am uninformed, which is why I try not to give a political opinion, because that's exactly what they would be, opinions. I have no idea. So it's the same as me making up answers, because I don't know. So I try to talk about only the few things that I feel relatively confident that I know about. I had a DM the other day who was like, I watched one of your videos and you said, you don't know how to get to 9 figures a month. And so I wanted to tell you. Mind you, the only person who's going to say this is not someone doing 9 figures a month, but we'll leave it aside. The point is that I will only talk about getting to 8 figures a month because I have been there. And so I know what it takes to get there. And I said, once I get to 9 figures a month, I will tell you that. Not that I don't have a map or a roadmap of how I plan to get there, but I won't talk about it until I've walked it. Yeah. And so like right now, I don't feel like I could walk any political discussion because I would get trounced by anybody who's more educated than me. And I'd be like, you're probably right. I don't know. And then I would be like, why am I here? I'd be like, oh, this is a game that I don't know the rules to. I'm going into a game that I don't have an advantage. I don't want to play. And so I play games that I know that I can win.
Could you see yourself going into that realm after?
I don't. Not on any time horizon that I associate with the current identity that I have.
Dude, so good.
If you enjoyed this clip, watch the full episode right over here, and don't forget to subscribe.